know, it may just be me, but I really got a feeling like we could catch fire and have a great season, huh? Now, who's with me?
Woo! The electric in the air!
Sometimes may be good, sometimes may be
The Cleats First, Logic Second Football Podcast with your hosts, Alexander Lauber and Phil Almodovar.
Welcome back to the Cleats First, Logic Second Football Podcast. Phil, last week was fun churning out videos for the transfer bonanza.
Yeah, whole lot of fun. Was able to do a lot of recording. Now we're back to the good old weekly show. And I hope you guys enjoy the interesting topic that we are going to talk to you about today.
So yeah, we'll be debuting the newest series on the Cleats First, Logic Second Football Podcast, the Royal ROI, or Return on Investment series, in which we'll be looking at the teams and the clubs who have conducted the best business in the transfer market over the last 25 years, and looking at the teams that have the highest net incomes and how they were able to bring in players for cheap and turn them out at such a high profit. So I think it only makes sense to start with the team who tops that list, and that is SL Benfica. So Phil, why don't you give a little introduction to Benfica?
Sure. Benfica was founded in 1904. Now, we haven't really talked about Portuguese clubs at all. We haven't really gone into the Portuguese league. It's not really considered to be one of those major top leagues in Europe. However, they do boast clubs that are very competitive throughout Europe, and Benfica is definitely one. Portuguese football club based in Lisbon, Portugal. They have won the most trophies in general by a Portuguese side with 83. They have won the Primeira Liga NOS 37 times, including having an undefeated season in 1972, 1973. They've won the Champions League twice, back when it was the UEFA Cup in the 1960s. So, like I said, they are very competitive in Europe. And they have not finished lower than second in Portugal in the past decade. They are a Portuguese dynasty, Alex.
Yeah, definitely a powerhouse in the league, and like you said, nothing to sleep on when it comes to European play. A very well-respected club, both for their performances, but also for the talent that they're able to churn out.
Yeah, Alex, and going to that kind of talent, I think talent starts with the coaching staff who's breeding that talent for the club. And over the past 25 years, since we are talking in terms of the past 25 years, Benfica has seen a massive amount of different managers. And you wouldn't exactly think that a club like Benfica, who is constantly winning trophies, constantly at the top of their league table, is having managers come and go like crazy. And that's mostly because a lot of these managers are going from Benfica to bigger clubs after they see success there, a lot like the players there. And if we want to go into the most important two managers, they both came after a drought, quote unquote. And I say quote unquote because for Benfica, a drought is finishing outside the top two in the league for multiple seasons. They were finishing third and fourth, and that was a drought for them in the early 2000s. The most notable two managers came after that: Jorge Jesus and Rui Victoria. Now, we will go into both of those. Alex, let's talk a little bit about Jorge Jesus first.
When it comes to Jorge Jesus, he brought Benfica titles through, and this was considered at the time an unconventional management style that was centered on youth development. Go figure, Phil. Teams aren't just bringing in tens of millions of dollars worth of players each transfer window. They're actually focusing on churning out their own talent.
You don't see that much anymore, huh?
It's a mixed bag, and the teams definitely that perform the best tend to do that just as well as evaluating external talent. But to that point, he wasn't afraid to start or sub on young talents in pivotal matches. He showed confidence in them, which definitely helped their confidence and their ability to play in big matches. Now, if you just look at some of the players that Jesus managed during his time at Benfica, the likes of a young Renato Sanchez, Axel Witsel, Angel Di Maria, Rodrigo, the one who's now at Leeds, David Luiz, Goncalo Guedes, and many more. Those are just some of the big names, but those are a lot of talented young players who ended up selling for a big value, and we'll go into those numbers shortly down the line.
Yeah, Alex. And just to put into perspective a little bit, Jorge Jesus managed Benfica from 2009 to 2015. So this is when those players that we just talked about are in the beginning stages of their careers. Now, let's move on a little bit to Rui Vitória, Jorge Jesus's successor after he was sacked in 2015. Rui Victoria had an interesting background, Alex. He was a youth team manager before being appointed to manager. You don't really see clubs going to the well of their youth squads as a successor for their manager who they just fired. Normally, you see them go to managers that just got fired from other clubs, managers or former players, I should say, as well for managers. You don't really see clubs go for a youth team manager to go to the big time. And that's exactly what Rui Victoria did. And Rui Victoria really championed Jesus's management style, even though he was his successor. He really took up right where Jesus left off and even said, quote, that their youth players were going to rule the world when he took over the club. Now, Alex, I don't know about you, but for me, that is a bold statement.
Yeah, it's definitely bold, but with the players that Jesus churned out during his first stint, and keyword first stint, we'll get to that shortly, there was definitely potential. And having worked in the youth system at Benfica, Vitoria definitely knew what he had coming and the types of players that he was about to debut in Benfica senior squad.
Yeah, and some of those players, which, like Alex said before, we will go into more detail on in a moment, that Rui Victoria was able to develop in his time at Benfica from 2015 to 2019 includes João Felix, Ederson, Ruben Diaz, Nelson Semedo, Victor Lindelof, and Luka Jovic, all household names at this point.
Yeah, definitely some impressive players that they turned out during his stint. Vitoria did leave the club in 2019, and Jesus was brought back and is currently the manager. But if we look at transfer business as a whole, since the 95-96 season, so the last 25 years worth of data, if we look at arrivals, 794 players joined Benfica's senior squad during those 25 years, and a total of 658.33 million euros was spent on players. On the flip side, 781 players departed the club during that time for a whopping profit of 1.28 billion euros, with a total return on investment of 621.14 million euros, which puts them atop of the list. Phil, that's crazy money that Benfica have been able to bring into their club by selling their players, and we'll go through some of the big names shortly, but that's a lot of money for a team to bring in, especially considering the caliber of football they play both domestically and across Europe.
Absolutely, Alex. And when we first looked at this list of clubs that had the biggest net profits since 1995, sure, I might have expected Benfica to be in the top 10, but I did not expect them to be number one. I think we were all expecting either Ajax or Dortmund, or any of those clubs really to be in the number one spot. But when you look at the numbers, you look at what Benfica has done for these players, with these players, you really understand that obviously they are clear cut top of that list.
Yeah, and hindsight is 2020 when it comes to this list. If you look at the names that we're about to read off shortly, or read off now, it's not really surprising. Atop of the list, João Felix joined Benfica's senior squad in 2018 on a free because he was an academy player, and left a year later for 114 million euros, so a net profit totaling 114 million euros. Atletico de Madrid paying up that fee. We know what a talented young player he is and all the potential he has. Will he fulfill that potential at Atleti? That is yet to be seen, but not surprising that he tops the list there, especially the way that the transfer market was inflating and inflating rapidly, especially pre-COVID.
Absolutely. And just from João Felix's departure, you get a sense of how big these margins are in terms of price paid versus price received. João Felix came up through the academy system at Benfica, as did Ruben Diaz, as did Nelson Semedo, as did Victor Lindelof, as did Renato Sanchez, as did Goncalo Guedes, plus more, and left for fees that were even more than the player's market value at the time, which we'll also go into.
So yeah, let's just continue running down that list. Ruben Diaz at number 2. Like Phil said, 2017, joining on a free from the academy, leaving, we know, this past summer transfer window to Manchester City for a fee of 61 million euros. So a total net profit of 61 million euros. And then looking at another player that Man City paid Benfica big time for, we know how great of a goaltender Ederson is. But the keeper joined Benfica in 2015 for 450,000 euros from Rio Ave FC and departed 2 years later in 2017 for 36 million euros. So approximately a 35 million euro profit for Benfica.
Yeah, and Alex, this is another trend that we're going to see from Benfica, especially in that era between 2010 and 2017. Benfica going to the well of South American football leagues to find youth stars for very, very low price tags.
Yep, no, absolutely. Now, if we look in that time period, Benfica didn't necessarily only bring kids up from the academy or bring in small money transfers. They did make relatively big money transfers. 2011, they spent 8 million euros on Axel Witsel from Standard Liège. And then 2012, so a year later, they were able to sell him for 36 million euros, a 28 million euro profit to Zenit St. Petersburg.
Yeah, and you're not going to see a whole lot of that throughout these players that we picked out as the most important. But Axel Witsel, obviously, we know that he is a class player for Dortmund now, and he was for Zenit St. Petersburg when he played there.
So then if we go back to the academy, Nelson Semedo, 2015, joined the senior club from the academy, like I said. And then 2017, departed for 32 million euros. So there we have another 32 million euro profit for Benfica on that sale to FC Barcelona. Staying in the academy in 2015, Victor Lindelof made his senior debut and was sold 2 years later to Manchester United for 31.5 million euros. Again, another 31.5 million euro profit in the bank on that sale to Manchester United. And the same can be said for Renato Sanchez, who made his senior debut in 2015 from the academy, and in 2016 was sold for 31.5 million euros as well to Bayern Munich.
And going from there, Alex, like you said before, there were some price tags paid by Benfica for players, and they were just able to turn them around. One of them was 2007, 7 million euros for Angel Di Maria from Rosario in South America. And in 2010, shortly after, Di Maria was sold to the club that he is most famous for playing with, Real Madrid, for 29.7 million euros. A world-class player, but still a 22.7 million euro profit for Benfica.
Yeah, look at that. Again, it's not really surprising to see that smart business turnaround from Benfica, especially during a period where that type of business wasn't done as quickly and as succinctly as that. Now, if we look to that same season, we saw them bring in Fabio Coentrao from Rio Ave FC, the same club that Ederson joined from, for 800,000 euros. And they flipped him the season after Di Maria, so in 2011, for 27 million euros, so a net profit of 26 million euros to Real Madrid.
Yeah, Alex, two really good, profitable transfers there. And we go down this list, Rodrigo, who is now at Leeds, being bought from Real Madrid's academy, which you don't see very often, and then flipped to Valencia for a net profit of 21.6 million euros. Goncalo Guedes, free from the academy, then sold for 27 million euros to PSG. I mean, you see a common theme here.
Absolutely, and if we just continue down that list, a lot of the players now that we have left that made big margin, that Benfica made big profit margins on, were brought in for not the smallest amount, but they were still able to recoup a large amount and a good return on that investment. Nemanja Matic in 2011 joined for 4.5 million euros from Chelsea, and in 2014 was sold for 22.5 million euros to Chelsea in return. So they were able to make 18 million euros from this deal with Chelsea, or from the series of deals with Chelsea. And speaking of Chelsea, David Luiz in 2007 joined Benfica from EC Vitoria for 450,000 euros and was flipped in 2011 for 22.5 mil, so a 22 million euro net profit.
Yep, and in 2013, Lazar Markovic came from Partizan for 9 million euros and was sold in 2014 for 22.5 million euros to Liverpool. Premier League clubs buying from Benfica in that 2010s era, coming to that well quite a bit.
No, absolutely. And I mean, if you look at another player on this list, the next name, we know how hyped he was at Frankfurt, went to Real Madrid, and he's had a rocky start. Of course, we're talking about Luka Jovic in 2016, joining for 6 million euros from Apoel Limassol. And in 2017 was sold to Eintracht Frankfurt by Benfica for 20 million euros, so netting 16 million euros, I should say, in that year there. Then the following season, Ramirez was bought from Cruzeiro for 6.8 million euros in 2009. And the next year, 2010, was sold for 19.8 million euros, so a 13 million profit when he was sold to Chelsea.
Yeah, and we keep on going. Andre Gomes in 2012, free from the academy. 2015 was sold for 18 million euros to Valencia. Javi Garcia, 2009, maybe a player you don't really know too well. He is currently retired from the sport, but in 2009, he was bought by Benfica from Real Madrid, 6.3 million euros, was sold in 2012 for 18.1 million euros to Manchester City.
Yeah, definitely some handy business there. Then we have the likes of Manuel Fernandez, who in 2004 made his senior squad debut from the academy, so he was brought in on a free. But then in 2007 was sold for 16.2 million euros to Valencia, so netting a total profit of 16.2 million euros. Nuno Gomes was brought in 1997, so looking at an older transfer for an undisclosed fee, which was rumored to be around under 100,000 euros from Boavista, and in 2000 was sold for 15.3 million euros to Fiorentina. A massive transfer fee though for those times, Phil.
Yeah, and It's no wonder that Nuno Gomes is considered one of the worst transfers in Serie A history. He was bought for an undisclosed fee, like Alex said, by Benfica and then sold for 15.3 million euros, which is quite a lot of money back in 2000 to Fiorentina. He had only played for 2 seasons, I should say, for Benfica in 2000 after being sold to Fiorentina, did not play well at all and was sold by Fiorentina just a couple of seasons later for under 2 million euros.
Yeah, and we haven't really taken inflation into account to this point, but Total Money does a great compilation of this on what they call the transfer index and actually looks at inflation from the original purchase to today's market and today's money. And it's interesting, just to put this into perspective, those 17 million euros back in 1997, or not 1997, I should say 2000, are valued at 43.374 million euros today, which is absolutely insane to see.
Yeah, just to put that into perspective, Alex, that's more than Manchester City paid for Ederson. That 17 million euros that Nuno Gomes was bought for by Fiorentina.
Yeah, definitely handy business by Fiorentina, or not by Fiorentina, by Benfica in flipping him for that amount. But then if we look at the last name on our list, Thiago Mendes in 2001 joined for 2.3 million euros from Braga and was flipped 3 years later in 2004 for 13.5 million euros to Chelsea, totaling an 11.2 million euro profit. So if we look at just the names that we mentioned there, 56.9 million euros spent on all of those players, and then they received 641.1 million euros total. So again, just those names alone were a net profit of 584.2 million euros.
Unbelievable, Alex. And another thing that I said that I would want to mention is market value. Now, players are valuated before they are bought and sold. They have a certain value. Clubs don't always pay the exact market, end up not always paying the exact market value for players just because of a number of different factors, like demand for players, like teams being greedy, a lot of different factors. And just to put into perspective here, the business that Benfica was able to do, it's absolutely genius. All of these 21 players that we mentioned, except for 2, were sold over their market value at the time of their sale. All except for 2.
And it should be said, market value is subjective. The source that we use and a lot of other people will use just for a frame of reference is transfermarkt.com, a phenomenal source. That being said, transfer value is in the eye of either the team owning the player and the asset or the team buying the player. And that, that's how business works. If a team values a player at 25 million euros and stays to that value, if another team only values that player at 15 million, you can see negotiations happen. But if the valuation is just too far in between, deals don't happen. And that's why we see a lot of deals that have such great steam and such great rumors behind them fall out halfway through negotiations.
Absolutely, Alex. And you could see that happening with the Luka Jovic transfer from Benfica to Frankfurt. He was actually sold for 40 million euros less than his market value at the time. And you look at some of these other deals, on the contrary, Lazar Markovic was sold for almost double his market value, his perceived market value at the time, which is seemingly massive.
The craziest thing of all, if you look at Luka Jovic specifically, when he made that transfer, He transferred for below his market value, but then shortly after that was flipped immediately by Frankfurt to Real Madrid for his above his market value. So it's crazy, again, that's another team's big business, but still how, that was on Benfica, I believe, loaned him to Frankfurt with an original option to buy for a lower fee. So they were able to pull that quick business and sell him for that massive profit. So that should be taken with a grain of salt. But still, for Benfica, yes, they didn't get the amount he was valued at the time, but you have to take that within the context of the transfer and the fact that he was loaned out and had this killer season at Frankfurt.
Absolutely. Alex, I did not realize that that was the story behind it. Thanks for shedding light on that. And to finish the conversation about market value here, the only other player not sold for more than their market value at the time of their sale by Benfica on our list is Andre Gomes. He was actually sold for exactly what his market value was at the time to Valencia. So I guess Valencia made out all right in that deal.
Yeah, so interesting big business. That wraps up the first episode of the Royal Return on Investment series. We'll bring this back once more during the January transfer window, and then we'll be back in the summer. I think how we're going to approach certain topics is if they are seasonal. So things like the Transfer Bonanza and the Royal Return on Investment series will be explored more during the transfer windows. But yeah, that's it for week 1. That's Benfica. Amazing business done by the club. And like we said to begin with, it's crazy to see that both they can, one, make such a high profit on their sales and their players, but also while churning out players as fast as they do, being able to still perform at such a high pedigree, both domestically and Europe-wide.
Yeah, Benfica are definitely an interesting club to look into if you ever look into the history of the club or what has happened there. And what you do see is a history that is very rich in both astounding players and astounding managers. Benfica are definitely one of the most renowned teams in Portugal, if not the world itself. And it was a lot of fun talking about them with you, Alex. Before we finish off today, though, let's get into our must-watch matches of the week.
For sure. So yeah, to jump right into it, we have a major match coming up this week in Serie A. AC Milan versus Juventus. We know the blood rivalry there. But this match has huge implications on the table. If Juventus can walk out of this match with a win, they will make that gap significantly smaller and take away a crucial 3 points from Milan in an attempt to retain their Scudetto.
Yeah, and Alex, this is going to be an absolute dogfight. We know, like you said, the implications of this match. We know that Zlatan and Ronaldo at this point are playing for glory, and that is not something that either takes lightly. And we are going to see probably one of the best matches this season, I think, in all of world football. And I think it is going to end in a 1-1 draw. Alex, what do you think?
It'll definitely be interesting to see how the first clash of the Titans ends. I think both teams know the implications of the match, and both teams will be showing up big for this one. I do think that Juve, after the way that they came out firing against Udinese this past week, and yes, I know Udinese is not remotely close to the level of any of the giants in Serie A. You have the likes of Dybala firing, Ronaldo firing, showing that this past week, you don't just need Ronaldo and Morata to score in order to win matches. I see them squeaking out. I see this being, like we said, a dogfight, and this being a tough match from whistle to whistle, but I see Juventus coming out with the 2-1 victory. So from here, let's take it on to the Carabao Cup semi-finals, where we're seeing another Manchester derby, Phil. Manchester United, Manchester City. How do you see this one ending?
Yeah, this time non-league, so it's obviously going to be very interesting to see how each club lines up if they decide to rest some of their major players now that we're really into the thick of it in the Premier League where matches are being played one after another after another. Maybe this is time for a rest for some of the big players on this clubs. Regardless, I think right now Manchester United are the class of the Premier League and will continue to be. City have regained some bit of form after a victory against Chelsea. Not sure how much that's going to carry over against the United squad. I'm going to say Manchester United 2, Man City 1.
Like you said, Phil, Manchester City has regained their form in recent weeks. We see John Stones, who a lot of people coming into the season wrote off. He's found form and he's found a great partnership, surprisingly, with Ruben Diaz. If they go with that option at the back, I can see the defense pulling it out and the counterattack on Manchester City as a whole. I can see that potentially being too much for Manchester United to handle. As a result, I'll give Manchester City a 3-1 victory, and I think they'll get that much closer to winning their, fourth Carabao Cup in a row.
Oh, that's a great question, Alex. That's another one we should look into. I'm not sure.
Let me look that up quickly. I'm curious. Yeah, City's won it in 2018, 2019, 2020, so this will be them vying for their fourth Carabao Cup in 4 years.
Wow. What a feat that would be. Moving on to the Bundesliga. RB Leipzig, continuing their run of good form. They look to keep things going and to keep that title race on against a Dortmund team. Could that be a little tricky for them, Alex?
I don't think so. Honestly, like we said in the Transfer Bonanza special, I think Dortmund still needs to shake up the team and take a fresh approach to things, moving out some of the talent and seeing who they can make a big profit on. And in turn, looking to shake their lineup up and get a reinvigoration. However, I don't see this being the weekend to do so, and I don't see this being the team to do it against. I think that RB Leipzig will come out of this with another 3-1 victory over Dortmund. Phil, where do you see this match going?
Yeah, Alex. And I think Dortmund struggled the most when they play against a club that either A, can neutralize their offensive prowess, or B, could take them pound for pound offensively. And I think RB Leipzig are one of the few clubs in the Bundesliga, that list probably including Bayern Munich and maybe Leverkusen at the time, that can go pound for pound with this Dortmund attack. I'm going to say because of that, for that reason, RB Leipzig get the win 4-2.
Definitely interesting to see how that plays out. And I think that will, if he does play, that'll be the debut of Dominik Szoboszlai in the Bundesliga. Definitely be interesting to see how he adjusts to German football. From there, we'll head over to Spain. And we have a big matchup with big implications for the title picture. Two teams in the thick of things and fighting it out. Sevilla and Sociedad. Phil, how do you see this match ending?
Thankfully, my Sevilla have found a real good run of good form. Unfortunately, last weekend, getting an unlucky result against Betis, I feel like they were the better club. That could just be some bias. But a 1-1 draw against Betis was well fought out. And if you look at this Sociedad team, if you could neutralize that attack up front, that young attack, I think Sevilla can easily play to their strengths and get a well-deserved 1-0 defeat, or 1-0 victory, I should say, over L'Oreal and jump into that top four.
It'll definitely be a tough fight. I think both teams will show up huge. However, I think both defenses will neutralize the other, and as a result, I can see this match ending a 1-1 draw. From there, let's head over to France, where Stade Rennes is playing Lyon. Again, two teams atop the table. We know how tough both of them have been fighting to try and top this unpredictable Ligue 1. Phil, how do you see this match playing out?
Yeah, it's been cutthroat this year, Alex. This season in Ligue 1. I could see another upset happening. I could see Rennes getting the victory here. I'm going to say 2-0. This Rennes team has some good young talents, and if they could beat a Lyon team with some unsettled stars, they could really jump up into the thick of it.
Yeah, I think it'll be, again, another tough fight. However, I'm going to learn from our last prediction when we predicted or a couple of weeks back when we predicted the PSG Lyon match. Both of us underestimated Lyon. Even with the unsettled big names, the Depays, the ORs, with uncertain futures in both of their hands specifically, but the team as a whole seemingly potentially shaky, I still think that they're going to power through this match. I'm going to reverse that scoreline. I'm going to say Lyon come out with the 2-0 victory. So that wraps it up for this week. Phil, nice to be back to the regular schedule. It was really fun developing the ideas for the Transfer Bonanza special, learning the ropes with that and seeing how we'll take that come the summer transfer window.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun here doing the ROI. I really like the idea of looking at one of the most important things in soccer or football, money. And we'll continue to look through stuff like that. We'll get another ROI to you guys soon in the coming weeks.
Yeah, it's definitely to that point. It's really interesting, like you said. We always think about this from a fan perspective, the fact that it's all about winning and winning big competitions, winning the league, performing well. But we forget at times, and I think both you and I, having studied business in university, can appreciate the fact that these teams need to remain profitable while winning at the same time. It's going to be interesting. Next week, we hinted to this during the Bundesliga Transfer Bonanza, but we will be looking at the team at the basement of the Bundesliga, and a team that seemingly they've always performed decently in the Bundesliga, but can't seem to win much, and also at the same time can't seem to bring in a return on many, if not any, of their star players.
Yeah, we'll be looking at Schalke next weekend and what has gone wrong there. And I can't wait to go through that with you, Alex, and for you guys all to hear that. Until then, have an awesome week. And remember, meat first, soccer second.